Chapter 1. The Warning from Ouagadougou. Benjamin Netanyahu sat in his office, scanning the intelligence report in his hands. Among the pages, one name disturbed him the most: Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader of Burkina Faso, had become a symbol of a new vision, not only for his people but for the entire African continent. Recently, his speeches directly targeted Israel's influence in Africa. While Israel had maintained a quiet presence on the continent for years, Traoré declared on live TV, "Africa is no longer anyone's playground. We are creating our own game. We owe nothing to anyone." These words weren't just a challenge. They were a declaration of war against the old world order. Netanyahu turned to his intelligence chief. "This kid is overstepping." "Mr. Prime Minister," said the Mossad advisor, "Traoré is not alone. A new African leadership is rising, and it seems he's at the center of it." From that moment on, Netanyahu realized he had never been more threatened. Chapter 2. Panic in Tel Aviv. Inside a closed meeting room at Israel's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, tensions were high. Traoré's latest move, expelling Western military bases from Burkina Faso, sent a message, not just to France, but indirectly to Israel too. Israel had been one of the West's silent eyes in Africa. Now, those eyes were being shut. An advisor spoke. "We are becoming isolated in Africa. Ethiopia, Uganda, even Rwanda remain silent. They're all watching Traoré." Netanyahu was furious. Decades of economic deals, military aid, covert operations. Could it all be undone by the rise of a single leader? But the most surprising part, Traoré didn't use war or threats, just words. Chapter 3. The Call from Africa's Heart. Traoré stood at a special summit held in Burkina Faso's capital. Beside him were representatives from Guinea, Mali, Niger, and even South Africa. "We," he said at the microphone, "are not asking for help from the outside. We will build our own economy, our own defense, and our own dignity. This continent will no longer be at the mercy of anyone else's diplomacy." Traoré's words went viral. African youth hailed him as a hero on social media. Subtitled in French, English, Arabic, even Hebrew. Netanyahu, meanwhile, found himself eclipsed. No matter what he did, he was no longer dominating the headlines. Traoré was. Chapter 4. Diplomatic Siege. Netanyahu turned to the US and Europe for support, but the world had changed. The US president refused to openly back Israel's Africa policy. "We want to stay out of this," said a White House advisor. "Africa is choosing its own path now." France went even further. The French president held a press conference alongside Traoré, announcing their wish to rebuild relations with Burkina Faso. For the first time, Netanyahu truly felt what it meant to be diplomatically alone. Chapter 5. A dangerous proposal. Netanyahu played his last card. A secret meeting was arranged. Traoré agreed to meet in Geneva, Switzerland. The location was undisclosed. The press never heard of it. Netanyahu hoped to offer Traoré a final deal. But what he didn't know, Traoré wasn't just a leader, he was a strategist. When the meeting began, Netanyahu spoke bluntly. "Israel can be a vital partner for Africa in tech and security, but this requires mutual understanding." Traoré smiled. "Israel can be a friend to Africa, but first, we have to decide whether we want to be friends with you." That line stung. It wasn't just rejection. It was Africa declaring it now had the power to choose. Chapter 6. Global Cracks. A week after the meeting, Traoré delivered a historic speech at the UN General Assembly. It became headline news. "Today I speak not just for one nation, but for all silenced peoples. Africa is not just awakening, Africa is responding." The speech received a standing ovation. The Israeli delegation walked out. On the flight back, Netanyahu whispered to an aide, "This is no longer our era." Chapter 7. Shattered Mirrors. Back in Tel Aviv, Netanyahu held a closed cabinet session. His face was pale, his voice low. "We are not facing just a young African leader," he said. "We are facing a new world." One minister cut in, "But he's just a soldier. Why give him this much credit?" Netanyahu snapped, "Because he listens to his people. Most of our politicians only listen to themselves. For the first time, the room fell completely silent. Chapter 8. Signs of Collapse. One of Israel's covert bases in Burkina Faso was raided by an unknown African unit. Documents seized were leaked to African media, revealing Israel's covert manipulations across the continent, media influence, economic pressure, political meddling. Traoré made no official statement. He didn't need to. The truth was speaking for itself. The global press dubbed it Africa's Snowden Files. Chapter 9. Protests in Israel. Protests erupted across Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Haifa. Banners read, "Why doesn't Africa want us? Netanyahu has isolated us. New leaders rise while we play old games." Israeli public opinion was deeply divided. Some still defended Netanyahu. Others believed he was outdated, a relic of another time. Netanyahu remained silent, but inside, he was making a plan. Either he would return stronger, or leave as a defeated relic of power. Chapter 10. Silent Diplomacy. Netanyahu sent a discreet message to one of his last loyal African allies, the president of Uganda. "Traoré's rise will affect us all. Is your economy ready for that?" The response was blunt. "We choose partners by vision now, not fear. And right now, vision comes from Ouagadougou." For the first time, Netanyahu's words had no effect. Chapter 11. The Global South Awakens. Traoré announced the formation of the new Southern Alliance, a coalition of African, Latin American, and some Asian nations. The first meeting was in Ghana. Core principles. 1. No foreign interference. 2. Focus on local production and tech. 3. Respect for sovereignty. Western media said, "For the first time since 1945, the global order is being rewritten from the South." Chapter 12. Cracks in the Israeli cabinet. One of Netanyahu's ministers leaked a private note. "Our prime minister is trying to manage the 21st century with 20th century policies." Resignations followed. Even Netanyahu's closest allies whispered doubts. Everyone sensed the end was near. Chapter 13. A continent tour. Traoré toured Africa, Nigeria, Angola, Senegal, Tanzania. Everywhere he went, crowds flooded the streets. "Traoré is our voice," echoed across the continent. In every speech, he spoke not just for Burkina Faso, but for Africa as a whole. "Now we will draw not just our borders, but our future." For Israel, it was a diplomatic earthquake. Chapter 14. The Media War. Israel tried to discredit Traoré in Western media, labeling him populist, authoritarian, naive. But it backfired. Traoré didn't need intermediaries. He spoke directly to the people. His live streams reached millions across the continent. One journalist wrote, "While Netanyahu's diplomacy happens behind doors, Traoré's happens in the streets." Chapter 15. Like a civil war. Within Israel, even some conservative voices began sympathizing with Traoré. "We need a voice like his," they said. "Not one that dominates with pressure, but one that inspires." Netanyahu's position grew weaker by the day. The youth were searching for a new kind of leadership. Chapter 16. The Continental Pact. Amid the digital warfare and rising tensions, Traoré made his boldest move yet. He proposed the Continental Pact, a unified African alliance focused on mutual defense, resource sovereignty, digital infrastructure independence, cultural and educational exchange. Leaders from 18 African nations attended the summit held in Ouagadougou. It was unprecedented. Old rivals sat at the same table. Nations with differing religions, languages, and histories signed the same document. Traoré stood before the signing ceremony and declared, "For centuries, our borders were drawn by outsiders. Today, we draw unity with our own hands." Applause thundered. The Pact of Ouagadougou was born, a blueprint for a future where Africa would speak for itself, protect itself, and build for itself. Chapter 17. Shadows in the Sand. But not everyone celebrated. In the deserts of North Africa, unmarked drones began appearing. In West African capitals, unknown agents were spotted surveilling communication hubs. Anonymous leaks suggested that a coalition of foreign intelligence agencies, including Mossad, MI6, and others, had launched a covert operation named Silent June. Its mission: destabilize the Continental Pact from within. Assassination attempts, blackmail, fake scandals. Traoré responded by activating the Pan-African Shield, a decentralized intelligence network led by whistleblowers, retired generals, and tech-savvy youth. Encrypted communication, deepfake detection AI, and grassroots informants became Africa's eyes and ears. Netanyahu, watching from a screen, murmured, "This boy, he's turning resistance into architecture." Chapter 18, A New Dawn broadcast. On the anniversary of the Continental Pact, Voice of the Continent launched a broadcast scene. By over 200 million people, Traoré stood not in a suit, but in traditional Burkinabe attire. Behind him, flags of all African nations waved. His message was clear, unfiltered, and emotional. This is not a war of weapons. This is a war of memory. They want you to forget who you were, so you never become who you're meant to be. But we remember, and in remembering, we rise. In Tel Aviv, Netanyahu watched in silence. No advisors spoke. No orders were given. Just silence, the kind that signals the beginning of something irreversible. Chapter 19, The Collapse Protocol. From a secure command center near Jerusalem, Netanyahu initiated Protocol Kedah, an emergency-level directive authorized only in existential threats to Israeli interests. The aim was digital. Sever undersea cables near West Africa. Jam satellite signals feeding African state networks. Freeze financial transactions linked to the Continental Pact. Within 6 hours, power grids in Lagos, Dakar, and Accra flickered and fell. Stock exchanges crashed. Banks couldn't process transactions. Communications between Continental Pact nations were paralyzed. The media called it the African digital blackout. And in its center, Traoré stood, offline but unshaken. Chapter 20, The Fire in Ouagadougou. With the capital city of Burkina Faso plunged into darkness, a massive crowd gathered outside the presidential palace. Torches lit the night sky. Chants echoed through the streets. "We are the signal. We are the shield." Traoré emerged onto the balcony, raising a torch of his own. In that moment, every citizen with a working phone began recording. Offline, independently, Traoré declared, "They shut down our systems to mute us. But they forget, we are a people of drums before data, stories before servers. Signal doesn't live in machines. It lives in us." The footage, shared later via portable drives and encrypted mesh networks, spread like wildfire, igniting digital resistance from Cape Town to Cairo. Chapter 21, Israel's Reckoning. Within the Knesset, Netanyahu faced unexpected resistance. Young Israeli. Lawmakers questioned the ethics of Protocol Kedah. Protests erupted in Tel Aviv. A viral hashtag trended globally. Hashtag Africa is awake. Global opinion shifted rapidly. South American nations condemned the blackout. Southeast Asian leaders reached out to Traoré in solidarity. Even parts of the US Congress demanded an inquiry into clandestine Israeli operations on the African continent. Netanyahu, once the architect of iron diplomacy, was now facing heat from within and without. He convened a midnight emergency meeting and whispered, "I underestimated the rhythm of resistance." Chapter 22, The Continental Web. In response to the blackout, African engineers, coders, and communication experts came together under a unified mission to build their own independent digital infrastructure. From Kigali to Accra, servers were reassembled. Solar-powered base stations were set up in villages. Encrypted mesh networks crisscrossed urban neighborhoods. No reliance on Western DNS. No dependence on Israeli or European telecom giants. They called it the UmojaNet, Unity Network. Traoré made its launch public. When they cut our connection to the world, we found our connection to each other. Within 2 weeks, 13 nations were linked. Within 2 months, that number tripled. Chapter 23, The New Broadcast. At the heart of UmojaNet was FreedomCast, a live broadcast platform immune to Western takedowns or surveillance. Traoré's first speech on Freedomcast reached over 400 million Africans. He spoke in French, English, Arabic, and several local dialects. Africa has always exported its minerals, its labor, its culture. But now, we export our truth. We define our story. And we guard our sovereignty with signal and soul. Youth across the continent began live-streaming local issues. Corruption exposure videos surfaced. Grassroots leaders held digital town halls. Information was no longer controlled, it was owned. Chapter 24. Netanyahu's isolation. Meanwhile, in Tel Aviv, Netanyahu was cornered. International allies distanced themselves. Investors pulled from cybersecurity contracts. Israel's digital trade with the African bloc collapsed. Netanyahu's inner circle fractured. Reports leaked. Mossad agents were withdrawing from African territories. Israeli embassies faced mass protests. Hacktivists took down Israeli government sites one by one. Netanyahu, now besieged by both diplomacy and digital defiance, stared out over a silent Jerusalem and whispered, "They weren't just rising. They were preparing." Chapter 25. The United Nations Reckoning. Ibrahim Traoré stood before the marble podium of the United Nations General Assembly. The chamber was tense. Delegates whispered. Cameras clicked. World leaders leaned forward. Traoré wore a simple dark green military jacket. No gold medals. No extravagant display. Just the patch of Burkina Faso and the insignia of African unity. He opened. "We are not asking for seats at a table built by colonial hands. We are building our own, and this time, everyone will sit equally." Gasps echoed. Some delegates stood. Others frowned. He continued. "Africa will no longer be your extraction point. Not for your lithium. Not for your narratives. Not for your silence." He laid out a 5-point plan. 1. An African digital firewall against foreign surveillance. 2. Continental currency backed by rare earth minerals. 3. A peacekeeping coalition without NATO oversight. 4. Media independence and training hubs across all member states. 5. A new international court, headquartered in Addis Ababa, for crimes by powerful nations. The room buzzed. Applause erupted from unexpected corners: Latin America, Southeast Asia, even parts of Eastern Europe. Traoré's closing line would be etched in history books. "You trained us to obey. We trained ourselves to lead." Chapter 26. The Global Shift. The days following the speech were unlike any the modern world had seen. Protests broke out in Paris, London, and Brussels, not against Traoré, but in support of his vision. Youth movements carried signs. "Decolonize the future. Solidarity with Africa. Unity is a contagion." Financial markets reeled. African-backed cryptocurrency surged. The Umoja net saw a 900% increase in traffic from outside the continent. The old powers scrambled. Policy papers were rewritten overnight. Think tanks sounded alarms. The West is losing its monopoly on narrative and innovation. But Traoré was not alone anymore. He had sparked a global realignment, a decentralized, defiant, and determined new world. Chapter 27. The Signal Never Dies. Months had passed since Traoré's thunderous address at the United Nations. Mainstream Western media had tried to drown his voice, misquotes, misinformation, even deepfake attempts. But it was too late, because the signal had already spread. From the mountains of Bolivia to the ports of Vietnam, from Lagos to Jakarta, people were tuning in, not to traditional media, but to Umoja net, now the world's most resilient decentralized information network. Traoré's speeches were translated into 72 languages. His ideas taught in underground universities. His silhouette became a symbol, a fist raised high beside a satellite dish. Meanwhile, Traoré himself had become harder to reach. Rumors said he no longer stayed in one place. Some claimed he traveled through villages on foot. Others believed he operated from an undisclosed tech fortress in the Sahel. None could confirm. But what mattered was not where he was, but what he had become. A movement, a blueprint, a spark. One night, in a remote Kenyan village, children gathered around an old radio modified to pick up Umoja frequencies. A boy whispered to his sister, Is it true he once made a whole empire fall with just a speech? She smiled and nodded. And just then, through the static, a familiar voice cut through. This is not the end. This is the beginning of the signal that cannot be silenced. Wherever there is truth, we broadcast. The children looked at each other in awe, far beyond the reach of corporations, firewalls, and colonial relics. A new dawn had begun, and the world would never be the same again.